I'm Professor Stephen Dyson,
And I'm Professor Jeff Dudas.
and we are two political science professors who have just watched the first two episodes of Pluribus, which is the new Apple TV show from Vince Gilligan, famous for Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, two kind of really well-regarded shows. A lot of anticipation for this show. We're going to talk about its themes, maybe some of the ideas that it's put on the table, maybe some of its politics, some of its ideas about individualism and collectivity and about utopia and dystopia, and maybe about art and audience. I have to say, Jeff, I'm really sort of excited by this show. I thought the first two episodes were smart, were funny, were provocative. They looked beautiful. I think it's really put a lot of things on the table, without really kind of fully, showing its hand, revealing exactly what its thematic take is going to be, but how could it in two episodes? But I'm pretty excited about this one, Jeff.
Yeah, I enjoyed the first two episodes. I found them pretty entertaining. I agree. I think it looks really, really good. The cinematography is really good.
I think we wanted to talk about the show in a few different ways, on a few different levels. We want to talk about just what's going on, what's happening in the plot, and maybe some of the show's generic kind of sensibilities, what genre it seems to be placed in. Then maybe talk about some of the big picture ideas or the metaphors. I mean, it's pretty clear that this is not a show about a virus, right? This is not like a techno-scientific thriller, and it's not a straight kind of sci-fi thriller or horror story about an alien invasion, although that may very well be what's going on, that it's operating on a metaphorical era. And then I wanted to talk a bit about, a section I've called art and audience. I think I might have an understanding of why Carol's immune from this virus and what role her particular form of misanthropy is playing, and how it relates to her career as an author of middle-of-the-road, drossy, fantasy history kind of novels. Even lowbrow. So in terms of kind of what's going on in the show, obviously the kind of inciting incident is this sort of SETI station receives a signal from outer space, and it's a recipe for a virus, and of course humans being the highly intelligent yet sort of utterly heedless species that we are, the first thing that we try and do is well, let's cook up this recipe, and we'll feed it to some mice, but of course there's a lab leak, and the virus kind of escapes, and it turns out to be this sort of virus that robs individuals of their individuality and makes them sort of quiescent and sort of satisfied. Actually, it's very much a kind of a happiness virus, a form of
Brave
happiness.
New World vibe going on.
Yeah, exactly. Like kind of flattens out affect, makes affect only exist in kind of the positive registers, and creates sort of pacifist individuals who are intensely satisfied, but also crucially are connected in sort of this hive mind way, such that all everyone knows everything about everyone else and is sort of able to communicate instantaneously. And I thought in a scene that was very well accomplished, the central character questions a young boy about kind of how he would conduct a sort of pelvic examination, because of course she's made the point that he's not only someone's son now, but he's also a gynecologist. He's also someone who can fly planes. He's every human being simultaneously. But of course, once you're every human being, you're also no human being.
We as us.
We as us,
as the first episode is entitled.
Yeah, exactly. And Pluribus, or you do look at that title and you wonder, are we supposed to call it Plur-one-bus? Because that's how it's literally literally written out. But that's the point it's making. Of course, that puts the movie in the realm of a lot of textual comparators. I thought most famously, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers is definitely in there, and all of its remakes and all of the things that have copied it since.
Yeah, I mean, there's the zombie genre that I think this text points to, but it has kind of these slow boil horror elements to it. One of the things I noticed was that the background music seemed to be really important here, particularly in the first episode, and in those initial scenes where Carol's driving the truck that she has absconded with and is kind of trying to get out of Albuquerque's sort of main central area and back to someplace that she hopes is not affected by the virus. Of course, there is no place.
Right.
But all of those scenes are offset with this kind of, again, it felt very like mid-century kind of orchestral scores that were more reminiscent of something like Hitchcock's The Birds to me than they were the kinds of contemporary soundtracks that you tend to get out of these sorts of movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting comparison. As zombie movies, I think, of course, are absolutely in the background here. I think we'd mentioned just off camera, like the 28 days / weeks, years kind of franchise. It really reminded us of that.
Which also begins with a lab leak.
Which begins with a lab leak, but which is also fairly clearly it's about zombies, but not about zombies. It's really about the ways that societies kind of organize themselves and think for themselves, or sometimes do great harm to themselves. Obviously, in today's day and age, if you do a story about a virus that potentially leaks out of a lab, you're in the realm of pandemic fiction or COVID. Potentially reality. That's one explanation for COVID, was that kind of lab leak. Anything pandemic related is going to read kind of quite raw to people around today. It has a black humor tone, and I thought there were parts of it that were genuinely funny. And I think Rhea Seehorn, the kind of actress, is a viable central character here. It seems to me like she has the heft and the presence and also the character to fulfill the many roles, shows the many faces she's going to have to show us to hold this thing together. Because she's got to be, just in those first 2 episodes, she's got to be grief-stricken, totally disorientated, absolutely confused, but also sort of funny, and maintain her role of kind of knowing misanthrope. Which is absolutely essential to her characterization.
And cynical alcoholic,
but also not just she's not a heartless person, right? She's horrified at some things that she causes to happen and other things that are going on, and that's quite a lot of things for one character to bear. And the whole show is going to rise or fall on the sort of coherence of that performance, and I thought it was there in the first episodes. It's a utopia / dystopia. It's in that genre. I'm not sure it has I don't know what its ultimate disposition towards utopia and dystopia is going to be. Obviously, it's early in the show. It is at the moment taking a fairly standard view of utopia that the people who don't study and work in utopian studies would take, right? Which is, utopia is this thing where everyone's going to be happy. It's going to be the provision of happiness by politics, or sort of beyond politics, making politics not really necessary anymore, and conflict not necessary anymore. But that to get there, that there'll be lots. It can only be imposed by coercion or by extraneous force. It can't be done by agendic humans themselves. It has to be done to you either by kind of blood-soaked tyrannical regimes, or in this case kind of some extraordinary external intervention, which means that the utopia, if it's brought about, is brought about in sort of rivers of blood, and so you shouldn't really try. And actually the utopia, when it arrives, will be profoundly dystopic, because it's to sort of re-engineer human emotions and interactions is going to inevitably lead to a flattening out of kind of individuality. And that's a position I think that people who study and advocate for the maintenance of a principle of hope in politics and life recognize as a caricature of utopia. But nonetheless, it is a fairly standard kind of mainstream reading of what utopia is.
It's fairly standard, and it reminds me of a movie that we podded on some time back called The Beast, in which the central conceit is pretty similar. I mean, here in that movie, you have human beings choosing, but it's kind of a soft choice. It's more like a soft coercion, I guess, into engaging in this treatment that essentially wipes them of their emotional life, or empties them of their emotional life. It's slightly different here because, as you say, it's not as though the pluribus is having its emotions entirely wiped. It's that everything and all the affect exists in the register of what would conventionally be understood as positive emotions.
Right.
But it's also pretty flat, right? And so it's reminiscent in that way.
Well, and shared and undifferentiated, crucially, right? So it's conventional. All emotions are now lowest common denominator, conventional sort of understandings of what would be good and nice emotions to have at this moment in time.
Which would make it truly Carol's nightmare world. Because, I mean, after all, what has she gotten rich and famous doing? She's gotten rich and famous by writing these trashy romance novels that effectively portray their characters in all of the exact ways that they're being portrayed when they become Pluribus.
Yeah, so let's talk about that now. I think I thought that might be the kind of third thing we'd talk about, this question of what makes Carol immune,
Yeah.
which I think is tied to a broader theme of sort of art and audience and the role of artists in mass culture and artistic integrity and all the rest of it. And I think there is that is one of the metaphorical structures that is existing, or one of the thematic lanes of possibility that the show has opened up that I'm actually very, very interested in.
Yeah.
I think you're right that this is a nightmare for Carol, who does not undergo the change, right? Who is a misanthrope in the pre-virus times and is a misanthrope in the post-virus
And
times.
it's what would the world look like if it was full of only people who are her super fans?
Well, and so
That's what we're getting here.
yeah, so episode 1 begins with a long scene in Barnes and Noble where, fan after fan is kind of brought to her, and they are very much seen through her eyes, right, which is weirdos. And she's sort of fairly open with them, or only a notch below completely transparent with them. She's transparent to us that she thinks they're idiots, and she thinks the books that she's written are stupid.
Yeah, and she inscribes the exact same thing on every single
May the
copy.
wind be with you, or so the wind be at your back, or so, which is
Her own treatment of them is wholly undifferentiated as well.
well, exactly. And so that's a smart thing the show is doing, because they believe they are receiving an individualized experience, but they're actually receiving a commercialized and insincere expression of positivity from their artistic hero, who thinks her own books are middle of the road dross. She says that they're like bad Star Trek, which I thought was an odd thing to say about those books, because the kind of speculative historical fantasy, which that's not quite what Star Trek was. However, I think it is a clever meta point, because there are Star Trek episodes that have the same storyline as Pluribus, right? What has happened to these people on this world where everyone is saying, "Peace be upon you, brother," but actually there's something sinister in the background. So a bad version of Pluribus is a bad Star Trek episode. I don't think it is a bad version, but that's an important kind of meta point. Carol's wife says to her at one point something about if you make one person happy, you're making lots of people happy. If you make even one person happy, maybe that's not art.
Yeah.
But it is something. It is important. And Carol's sort of struggling with this. She has this secret serious book that she's wrestling with firing off into the world, but hasn't quite got around to it. But she's definitely distraught at her own artistic output.
But she's also afraid to release it because of something her wife, when she asks her wife, she says, "Do you think it's good?" Right, this unreleased manuscript, this is serious manuscript that she's been working on. And the wife doesn't say, "I think it's good." She says, "I think people will like it," which is obviously calibrated to appeal to Carol in that moment, to Carol's sensibilities. But what it also indicates is that Carol, even in her fantasy life, it is not devoid of these commercial considerations, right? Because if it was, her wife's earlier point, if one person loves it, it's worthy, would articulate and would strike her, and it doesn't seem to. Right. It's I think people will love it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's Carol wrestling with that insecurity, right? That she sort of has a panorama of self-loathing. She on the one hand, she loathes the thing that is making her successful and loathes that kind of artistic output, and therefore must at some level loathe herself for going through that. At another level, she is too insecure to release the serious book into the world, and at a third level, she sort of hates herself for wanting, in spite of knowing she should make a real artistic statement and believing she's capable of doing it, but just is not quite brave enough. She also secretly wants it to be both an artistic statement and super popular. And I think there's a real commentary going on about the role of it's the role of culture writ large, but the role of the artist within culture, and what is the artist's kind of responsibility. And one thing that occurred to me, because this is a show that, while not explicitly about politics, has obvious political, as all utopias do, has obvious political resonances. One thing that occurred to me might be going on there is Carol is an elite, and she wants the masses to like things that the masses don't like. And she's appalled and disgusted by the things that the masses do like. And it's particularly personal for her because the things that they do like are coming from her.
Yeah.
And she's simultaneously discussing with them. And, we live in a political time where lots of elites have been surprised and disgusted by what a lot of people actually seem to want from not only culture, but politics as well.
Yes, but they're also, just like Carol is, happy to profit off of it.
Oh, yeah.
Or to use it to their own benefit. The other thing that strikes me that is sort of on this point, I think, as well, is that so when Carol writes her trashy historical fiction, she has what for her is the very damaging impact of a huge audience positively responding. So when she puts out her sort of false veneer of art, it's very positively received. When, however, she is her most authentic and genuine self, right? Very angry, negative, honest, brutal, and direct, what ends up happening? She ends up murdering millions and millions of people. So it's part of what's happening. You're right. It's this story of an artist who is not actually being genuine in their art or honest in their art. And in one context, like a kind of a commercial context full of commodities and throwaway, cheap, unlasting, I suppose, products of entertainment. In that context, she's extremely successful in a material way. In the other context, when she is her authentic self, right, the impact is grotesque.
Yes.
And so these two environments that she finds herself in, ironically, end up just sort of reinforcing her own ambivalence about what she's doing as an artist.
Right. No, I think that's true. I think that's true. So I'm really interested to see how that kind of develops, because I'm sure that's a theme that will be persistent throughout the series.
The thing that I'm just thinking of now, and we're going to depart a little bit maybe from the script, but I'm curious about your thoughts on is the method of transmission for this virus is to be forcibly kissed by somebody who you don't want to be kissed by.
Well,
Right?
yes.
So it's assault, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very particular kind of assault. And it's assault. It's a kind of assault that is linked in a certain way with exactly the sort of trope of lowbrow romance, right? In which it's frequently the case that like one character is not really is taken by passion, right, and takes out passion on someone else who is not really into what's happening, right? It's so the exact mode of transmission into this nightmarish world of Carol is the one that she plays with herself for profit, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure if you had any thoughts about.
Yeah,
the
I
method
definitely
of
noticed that
transmission.
the virus at least at first was transmitted that way. I think they kind of
That's the only way was.
I don't know. They were also swabbing their mouths and wiping them on donuts. I think there's a saliva or bodily fluids kind of thing. But it is true that the initial transmissions between the people in the lab were done through,
And eventually,
you're
some
right,
kind
forcible
of
kissing.
chemtrails thing, and that's the other thing that I noticed, right? So the conspiracy about chemtrails is old. It's old school.
Or the
American
planes that are flying in a
conspiracy
line in
thinking,
the
right?
sky. Yeah.
And that they're the chemical trails like contain these kinds of mind control,
Right.
nanobots or whatever.
Right.
That's a very old school American conspiratorial fantasy. So again, he's playing, it seems to me, Gilligan, with these kinds of playing knowingly, probably with these kinds of fantasies of destruction.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's very noticed. Yes, the initial the kind of forced kissing bit was going on, and what she's writing is sort of erotica, right? Like all the people. I mean, ironically, given Carol's the inspiration for Carol's sort of male heroic character, erotic fantasy character in the book,
It's
is
definitely erotica, right? I mean, at her reading at Barnes and Noble is an erotica passage
right.
that she reads.
Yes, exactly. So I agree. That was very significant, and it does make you wonder, because all of that's coming from inside Carol and is then sort of externalized.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder to what extent a lot of these are, as you say, nightmare is the right word, right? It's like almost a psychic projection.
Yeah.
I mean, Carol in some sense is orchestrating this catastrophe. I mean, she's enormously significant on a mass scale,
Right.
to what's going on. It's her sort of she's the only one I think who gets angry and kills millions of people, right?
It's the only one we've seen so far. Right?
Because rather crucially, the setup is that the conflict is not Carol, or is not only Carol in the hive mind, right? There's also a third group, which is similarly sort of immune people
Mm-hmm.
who are a very small number,
Mm-hmm.
but who are also like completely fine with it and
Yeah.
actually see this as an improvement. I mean, for them, it is the utopia.
Yeah.
And why are they, why is Carol being so difficult
Mm-hmm.
and all the rest of it? And what's his name? Cumber is the great other character, I think, in this. The guy who turns up on Air Force One
Mm-hmm.
for his meeting with Carol, and he's decided what he's actually going to do here is sort of live like a king, and he's
Yeah.
got a harem, and he's kind of having the highlight.
Famously, he's going to go to Las Vegas and stay in the suite of the king of rock and roll.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And those people are all fine with it,
Yeah.
and that's another conflict that's going on.
They're all fine with it, and the only things that they're not fine with, right, are things that Carol considers to be trivial. Right, like they're upset that the animals are out of the zoos,
Yeah.
and
Or that she swears
or that she swears,
or drinks.
or that she, or that the animals, like they're going to take their dogs away, like they can't keep their dogs anymore.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's stuff that Carol considers to be trivial, and not the fundamental problem, which is this kind of the wiping of individuality en masse.
Right.
But you're right. There's that third set of conflicts right here. And we haven't met the other. I presume that in future episodes, we're going to meet the other immune people. And I presume we're going to get a story about why they're immune. But there's a certain meta. I mean, I think one of the things that has come up as we've been talking is that there's a kind of a meta vision of what's going on here, is that this is Carol's nightmare.
Yeah.
It's Carol's series of deepest anxiety literalized in her life.
Absolutely. So the question of what is the kind of dominant illusion here? What is the dominant metaphor? I mean, to the extent that Invasion of the Body Snatchers is this kind of dominant pretext here, the Invasion of the Body Snatchers very famously was read simultaneously as an indictment of or a fear of communist homogenization and a fear of kind of right-wing homogenization. It was read as an anti-communist film and an anti-McCarthyite film in the 1956 when it came out. So a homogenization from the left and the right, and the kind of you're denying my individuality.
Yep.
You're trying to impose a groupthink on top of me by coercion is the critique of every ideology about every other ideology, certainly in contemporary, America.
Yeah.
So this kind of structure that's been set up lends itself to a number of different readings as to what the target could be, right? It could be read as a critique of communism, socialism, that kind of thing. It could simultaneously be read, and has been read in other contexts, as a critique of neoliberalism or the unfettered market, a critique of commodity capitalism and the commodification of everything, including and maybe especially culture. A critique of, and I think you think this is really going on in the show, a critique of contemporary online groupthink, kind of with social media as the viral transmission thing, and that the hive mind being just the collective wisdom or unwisdom, but thinking anyway of the connected masses.
That's what I got out of it. I mean, I think there's something happening for sure here about the mode of the digitized virtual mode of interaction, and the way that on one hand it promises extreme individuality, but the scripts for being individual are all so well set that everybody is individual in exactly all the same ways.
Yeah.
And we see that, I think, in the first half of the first episode. We see there's a lot, I think it's important that Carol doesn't seem to have a phone, and everyone else does. And I think it's symbolically important that Carol's wife is infected while she's staring at her phone, reading the comments of Carol's super fans, and like trying to do an impromptu, ask me anything type of deal with Carol.
Yeah.
So I don't think that those are. I don't think that's accidental. Right.
Well, and then she drops the phone when she becomes infected, and the phone smashes in great sort of symbolic style.
Yeah. So I to the extent that there's an other here, it feels to me like that's it. That's It's the method by which people have enslaved themselves,
Yeah.
right? And so the questioning sort of classic American counter-subversive thinking is going to be, is there an external force that is orchestrating and conducting all of this?
Hmm.
I mean, there almost always is,
Hmm.
right, in this manner of storytelling. And I suspect there probably is, right? Because I mean, somebody sent the transmission after all, the recipe through the 600 million light years or whatever. And so one wonders if what we're seeing here is a kind of prelude to an eventual introduction of a kind of totalizing other, an alien force that's controlling humanity from afar.
It'd be the perfect way to set up an invasion, right? Like make everyone just quiescent
Yeah.
and kind of happy with anything goes. No, I think there's definitely a lot of kind of
Well, and crucially, unwilling to kill anything.
yes,
Yeah.
and therefore not resist in
Yeah.
any way. Although again, I don't think this is going to be a literal sci-fi thriller. I don't think the aliens are going to turn up in kind of tripods and if they turn up, there'll be some darkly comic metaphor for something else. All right, so if you have thoughts on Pluribus, we'd really love to hear them. We really think this show is sort of so amenable to a lot of different readings and a lot of different interpretations that we want to kind of test ours with you, but also hear what yours are and get challenged by your thoughts. So please do that. I'm really looking forward to the next episode. I'm kind of really sort of into this.
Yeah, I think I'm in.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we will do a similar video after the next episode next week. But on that bombshell,